How's it going, folks? Taylor Bukowski here. Today we're going to be learning about how horses and other herd animals think and how to communicate with them the way they understand best. First off, we will start with the basics. Horses are herd animals. They are of the equine species, meaning they have a single hooved foot and they have strong instincts to run at the first sign of trouble. That is how this prey animal stays alive. This is why they are built the way they are, with long, muscular legs, large nostrils, and a huge capacity for taking in large amounts of oxygen to feed those muscles and keep them running, and therefore alive. They have eyes on the side of their face to be able to see predators coming up from behind them, and quick reflexes to kick anything that sneaks up on them. Fun fact, the only thing quicker than a horse kick is a horse's reaction. A funny saying in the horse world is that there are only two things that scare a horse: things that move and things that don't move. So basically anything can scare a horse. Now, horses don't sleep much. In fact, they often stay awake 21 to 22 hours a day. Because they're prey animals, they don't spend a lot of time laying down taking a snooze. And when they do, they have herd animals around them that protect them and keep them safe. They watch over them as they sleep. And at the first sign of trouble, those horses will feel the hooves on the ground, and that will give them that warning sign to get up and move. So what are they to do all day besides standing around? Why? Graze, of course. Wild herds travel to different grazing grounds, often covering distances of 25 miles a day. They're getting different sources of nutrients and varying their diet. A varying diet in any horse is very important. Really any animal in general. If you feed them the same thing every day, then they're likely to develop other health issues or even colic. Colic is usually a compaction in the intestines, which can be very dangerous for horses. A lot of times they die from it, so be very careful with your horse. At the same time, don't switch up their grain every day. Don't switch up their food every day. For the most part, if I'm feeding a horse, I would say the only thing they get every day is hay. Good roughage hay. Don't just feed them alfalfa every day. Give them a little bit of varying diet, and they should have lots of regular green grass to eat in pasture, not just one source of food. When it comes to grain, don't overfeed your horse with grain. It's very sugary. They're not really meant to eat grain a lot. It's more of a treat. It's not a natural thing that horses would be eating too much of in the wild, and it's just not super great for them. Again, it's a snack. If you're going to try to put weight on a horse, good quality hay or alfalfa is a good way to put weight on a horse, along with other grass, regular grazing. But when it just comes to feeding your horse and trying to put weight on, don't worry about the sweet feed. Don't worry about all those grains and those. You're basically feeding your horse candy bars. Besides eating, horses will also take part in rolling in the dirt and mud for a dirt bath and natural sun protection, as well as getting the gunk out of their hooves. Or they might go for a little swim in the watering hole, or just run around and play with their horsey friends. Have you ever wondered where the term horseplay comes from? Horses are very social animals, and they rely on their herd members to keep them safe. With that comes an understanding of horse hierarchy. That is, you are either higher or lower. You are pushing, or you are being pushed by a higher horse. When I say pushing, I don't mean you are literally pushing each other back and forth, but rather you're yielding to each other's pressure. He who holds his ground is higher in the world of horses. Pushing can be done by a horse just looking at another horse, and they move their head away. Not much, but the other horse did indeed yield to that pressure. Even if it's just in the slightest bit, they still moved. Therefore, the higher horse reinforced their status in the hierarchy. If that doesn't work, then the higher horse might take a step in their direction. Pin the ears, switch the tail, and if that doesn't work, they might try to bite or turn the butt and threaten to kick. During this time, the lower horse will either move away or push back and test, just to see if this is the day that they will be able to move up in the herd. Will they be able to come up in the pecking order and get the better shade or first pick of the mares? This is what horses are thinking during all those hours they are awake. Meanwhile, the lead horse will be working to maintain their status as leader and show their herd why they should be followed. They can keep the herd safe. They know where the good resting spots are, where the good food is, where the good water is. They know how to teach them good horse lessons. They are able to procreate and make stronger, healthier, smarter babies. Smart Mustangs in the wild will earn their right as leader, not by using their sheer power or force, but by using their brain and reserving their energy. The older Mustangs will have learned valuable life lessons to teach the impatient youngsters that can be passed down to their young in the future. Horses don't naturally like to fight unless they have no other option. That is why it's so easy to manipulate and abuse them. Many horses, like dogs, live miserable lives due to the lack of understanding from their human counterparts. The idea of dominating these beasts of burden and showing them who's boss is a very popular training style that the majority of the horse world is plagued by. What we really need to do is teach the horse that we can lead them into a scary situation and they can trust us to keep them safe. To do so, you need to think like a horse. So let's begin. Horses, like many prey animals, learn from pressure and release. This can be physical and social pressure. Think of it as if you were filling a balloon. You put too much hot air in there, and it's going to pop. This is a horse getting too nervous and blowing up, or giving themselves release. thus learning a bad lesson. But if you let the air out before the balloon gets too tight, then the horse learns they can tolerate a scary stimulus and understand that it won't hurt them. They also learn that they can trust you. You reinforce your status in their herd as being high horse, and they want to follow you. You are their natural leader. They want to follow the leader. The leader keeps them safe. When done properly, this technique will teach the horse to think more before they react, which will make them safer in the long run, for their sake and yours. When working with horses, you need to understand that they will be fearful of any new stimulus, but due to their adaptive nature, they can overcome their fear very quickly, especially when done right. Remember, just because something works doesn't make it right. Working with animals is a process, not an event, so don't expect to get it done all in one day. Another great way to get your horse to respect you and see you as a leader is by moving their feet. This can be done in a round pen or while lunging a horse. You need to understand driveline when working with prey animals. The driveline is an invisible force that will move the horse forward or stop them. This is usually at the shoulder or the withers, the point just above the shoulders. When moving a horse in a round pen or lunging them on a rope, you want to stand behind the driveline because standing in front of it will keep the horse from moving forward. You want to stand behind the driveline, behind the shoulders. If you stand in front of it or at the driveline, the horse will not move forward because you're basically blocking them with this invisible line. Stand behind the shoulders just a smidgen and ask them to move forward. You'll put pressure behind the shoulder or towards the butt, and that will get the horse to move forward. If you want to stop them, move in front of that shoulder, in front of the drive line. The horse should automatically stop and turn to look at you. At that point, you can ask them to move in the opposite direction, showing them you can teach them to move, stop, turn direction, all of that without even touching them, just by using your body. If they don't stop to look at you, that's usually a sign that the horse doesn't necessarily see you as leader, and they don't necessarily feel the need to listen to you or trust you or follow you. So it'll take a little bit more groundwork, which is what you're doing, and more training with them to teach them why they should listen to you. It's just like working with any animal, with a dog, with a cat, or even with a child. You don't need to use force to teach them to listen to you or to help them understand why they should listen to you and why they should follow you. By simply moving their feet, changing their direction, by showing the horse that you can move them back and forth and stop them, change direction, that horse will see you as an effective leader, and they'll want to trust you and follow you. When it comes to teaching a horse to overcome a scary stimulus, we want them to accept touching around their legs and under their body. Horses will generally be nervous with things going under their body because they can lose their footing, and if they get their leg trapped, that's a dead horse. So we need to work slowly and read the horse's body language to see if we're putting too much pressure on them. Start with some rope or a whip. Whips can be used for more than just beating a horse. As seen here, we will use it to desensitize the horse and teach them that handling around their feet is okay. Let the horse see it, smell it, rub it on their nose, rub it on their neck, rub it on their shoulders. A great way to teach a horse that you understand them and you understand how they talk is to not go straight up to the face and start petting it right away. Go to the shoulders, go to the withers. That's where two horses will scratch each other with each other's teeth. They kind of give each other a little massage, a little buddy rub. That's how they kind of greet each other. By the shoulders, by the side, by the chest. Don't go straight for the face. When the horse shows that they can accept the whip by their nose, they smell it, they see it, you can start rubbing it on their neck. Then start moving down the front of their leg. Start on the outside of the leg and rub up and down very softly for just 1 or 2 seconds, then take it away. While you're rubbing the horse, this is putting pressure on them. When you take it away, you're giving the horse release. You're inflating and deflating the balloon. Horses learn by the timing of the release. Take too long, they're likely to react, startle, or move away on their own. In their mind, they learn to continue this behavior because they were reinforced for moving away from the stimulus. They got their own release. They moved away and became comfortable before you were ready to teach them that. So take the stimulus away before they feel the need to move away, and they can learn to tolerate it. You can certainly give them a little piece of carrot afterwards or a little bite of some grain. I personally don't think they entirely connect the behavior with the food reward as much as they would with the release of pressure, but to each their own. Either way, keep moving this item around the horse's leg, moving up and down on the inside and the outside of the leg. Training with any animal takes time. It's a process, not an event. So don't expect to get there in one day. You're on horse time, which means you'll get there when the horse is ready. Horses are great teachers, and they will teach you some good lessons, like patience if you're willing to listen. They'll also teach you some bad lessons, and they'll tell you when you're doing it wrong. Once you practice for a couple of minutes on one leg, work on the next one, and continue until you worked your way all the way around the horse, being careful not to get kicked in the process. However, if you're too worried about getting kicked and act flinchy and spooky, you'll likely get kicked because you're showing the horse you don't trust them. Like when you're trying to pet a cat and you're trying to avoid getting scratched, and you end up getting scratched anyway. The cat says, "Dude, you're spooky, I don't trust you, quit messing with me." When you're working with a horse, be confident, not aggressive. If you try to pat a horse too slow and you go up very slow and cautiously, you're acting like a predator. You're going to scare the horse as if a spider is crawling up your own arm and you're freaked out by it. Be confident, but not aggressive. If you're worried, rub the horse at the distance of your rope or whatever tool you're using. Over time, work on getting closer and closer. Work on the belly, in between the front and back legs, under the tail, over the back, on the neck, on the face. All this takes time. The horse will tell you if you're doing it right or wrong. If they shoot their head up and look nervous and flinchy, you're working too fast. Slow down and make sure not to ambush the horse, especially under their body. We are predators and we use our hands and make quick motions. But the horse can eventually learn to accept it when we've done our homework. Try swinging it around their feet, around their legs, let it drag on the floor, and work your way up from there, always watching the horse for signs of stress. Along with training a horse, it's equally important to understand the equipment to use while riding. And there are dozens of different brands and types of tack and gear out there, so I'm just going to cover what to look for when buying or using tack on a horse. Now remember to think about your horse's comfort when buying them gear. Stud chains, tie downs, martingales, nose bands, spurs, whips, nylon cinches, halters, web halters with buckles on them. All of these, I feel, are not made with the horse in mind. In fact, they're made, the stud chains and the tie downs and the martingales and the nose bands specifically are made for pain compliance. Big bits, leverage bits, mechanical hackamores, squeeze the jaw, especially if they have a chain underneath. They are meant to apply pressure, leverage, long shank leverage bits. All of these tools are made to create pain and have leverage. And the tom thumb bit and snaffle bits and all these tools that are made to supposedly help the horse, teach the horse how to carry his head or where to put his head or to roll curl and all this nonsense. It's made for the humans, not the horses. So I do not recommend anything with any metal anywhere around a horse, around their face, around a dog's face. I don't like halters, web halters with buckles. I like a regular rope halter. Some of those rope halters have a little bit of metal. I don't like that. I like a regular Clinton Anderson rope halter or something that's very simply just rope. I use a bit of sailing rope as a lead. You can put through the rope halter so there's no buckle. A lot of times people will purposely or accidentally snap the buckle onto the horse's chin, whether they're trying to teach them something and correct the horse that way, or it's just an accident. I just don't like metal. The rope is much easier to work with. It's much softer. There's no extra weight. There's no general way to even accidentally hurt the horse unless you're really trying to. Things can absolutely happen, but that's just my opinion. Main thing to walk away from that is that I don't like metal anywhere near an animal's face. The buckles are for fancy and they're actually very easy to break and snap. With rope, you're just pulling on rope against rope. It doesn't sound like it would be super strong, but they actually are among the stronger halters out there than the fancy kinds with all these special designs in them. But again, to each their own. Now, stud chains are chains that go over the horse's nose, over the cartilage. Sometimes they go under the chin, sometimes they go under the lip. Tie downs are basically something that ties the horse's chin to their chest so they cannot raise their head. A lot of people use those because they say it's to teach the horse to carry his head when really, or it stops a horse from bucking and rearing. A horse knows how to carry his head. The human just doesn't know how to ride, or they don't understand the horse, or the horse is rearing and pulling because they're in a lot of pain, generally because of the pain bit in their mouth. And the nose band is there to go in front of the bit so the horse cannot open their mouth. They literally tie the bit in the horse's mouth and they can't open their mouth to relieve some of that pressure. We'll talk about loose reins here in a little bit, but these are just things that I don't like. I don't like bits, spurs, whips, any kind of pain device for horses. I feel that they are cheap, just the same as I do not like choke chains, shock collars, prong collars, slip leads, dominant dog collars, star collars, any of that nonsense for dogs. That's just, again, my choice. So when riding, there's a few different types of saddles, mostly well known, the Western and the English type. I personally prefer the Western type saddles. I don't participate in any sports. I just like the fact that they have a broader surface area than the English saddle. But again, to each their own. When picking out saddle pads or blankets, you want to make sure that they're thick enough to pad your weight properly, but not so much that you end up sliding right off the horse. So not too thick, not too thin. I go with 3/4 of an inch to an inch, depending on how heavy you are. You might be able to try the different sizes depending on your weight and what kind of saddle you use. If you pick a saddle pad that's too thin, you'll often find that you have pressure spots in your horse's back, around the back and the withers and the shoulders. meaning the saddle was putting so much pressure on the horse they couldn't even sweat in that spot. So be very careful. So make sure you measure your horse properly for a proper saddle fit and a proper saddle pad. When you're using a cinch, it should be equal on either side of the saddle for a proper saddle fit and a balanced saddle. A lot of people will use nylon or synthetic types of cinches, which is just the strap that keeps the saddle on under your horse's belly. Usually the front cinch, if you only have one cinch, goes behind the horse's front legs, and it tightens around the rib area. Some people will use nylon or synthetic, as it does not really stretch and it stays put, and you can get it a really tight fit. But it doesn't breathe with the horse, and people will over tighten their cinch so much they practically cut the horse in half. A lot of people will do this for sport because the saddle doesn't move. If people don't want the saddle to move, they don't know how to ride. Saddles should move a little bit. It's very natural for them to move a little bit with the horse. Again, if they don't, it's going to be very uncomfortable for the horse. After a cinching horse, consider picking up their front feet, their front legs, stretch that skin out under the cinch so it's not pinching there. It's not entirely crucial, but it would make the horse a little less cinchy and a little more comfortable during your ride. Imagine if you're putting on a backpack or something and you get a shirt kind of tangled up in there where you got something pinching your skin. You want to make sure you're nice and comfortable. These are extra things that you can keep an eye out for when you're working with your horse. Now, during the time when you're tacking up your horse, you should be checking over all of your gear, making sure there's no stickers, rocks, or anything else that might end up irritating the horse, especially when placing the saddle pad on. You don't want to place the saddle pad on the ground where there's rocks, bugs, stickers, dirt, sand. You don't want to put it on wood where there's going to be splinters. That's the part that goes on the horse. So when you put your saddle pad down, oftentimes I'll put it over the saddle because it protects the saddle pad, keeps it clean. It also protects the saddle from being sun bleached. But that's the part that goes on the horse. So make sure to check it out, brush your horse off, get any extra dirt off, put your saddle pad on. When you put it on, oftentimes I'll put it a little higher on the neck and slide it down. This is because when you put it on and slide it down, it keeps the hair laying the right direction. If you put it on the horse a little bit lower, move it up, you're going to scrunch up that fur, making it slightly more irritating for the horse. Again, everything you do should be benefiting the horse. So these little things that really don't take much longer if you know how to do them. It will take you no more time, and your horse will be much more comfortable and may have more of an enjoyable time carrying you than if they're really uncomfortable and you're fighting them with a bit and you're fighting with them and kicking them and spurring them and whipping them and just getting an overall fight with your horse. So these are just little tips that I've learned over time from true horsemen and horsewomen for men and women who really care about their horse because their horse does a lot of good work for them and they want to pay them back. So moving on from sacking out your horse to having their legs touched and getting them all tacked up and ready to go, let's talk about how to use one rein while riding your horse in a rope halter. Remember, if you can lead your horse and you can trailer them in a halter, you can ride in one. It's best to start in a small area such as a round pen or a small fenced area, just in case your horse takes off on you, they won't go far. If you're used to using a bit, but your horse knows how to lead in a regular halter, then just attach your rope to your halter. Pull it over to one side and hop on. Now, again, I prefer rope halters. I don't like metal on their face. Anything that would just be rubbing on their face. Obviously, I don't like anything in their mouth. I don't like the metal bits. It doesn't matter to me how many times people say their horse loves their bit. If you look at a lot of show horses, they are foaming at the mouth, and people say that is to lubricate the bit. That's not natural. Horses would not need to lubricate the bit if it was not rubbing on their gums and their teeth and cracking their teeth and rubbing on their gums and their tongue and causing pain and discomfort. So let's just put it that way. Now, you don't have to make a huge switch when you are going from a bit to a halter or to bitless. If your horse knows how to lead in halter, start riding in a halter. Now, before you get started, it's always best to make sure you have your horse's mind. So try a quick flex on either side of the body. Flexing means you gently reach down your single rein with one hand, bring it back up to your body, and doing so should cue the horse to turn their head, following the rein. They should basically lean their head over to touch your shoe. If they don't turn right away, hold the rein where it is, and if necessary, shorten just a pinch more to make the message clear that you're asking your horse to flex. If they haven't done this before, then practice on the ground before you're on their back. This is something you should have worked on during your groundwork when teaching your horse to yield to pressure, round penning, and lunging. Either way, whether you normally flex your horse or not, this is just a good time to start. A quick flex and let them have their head again. Remember, we don't want to keep that pressure tight. When you're doing it, you're not grabbing, you're not yanking, you're using very slow, steady pressure just to bring their head around. As soon as they give you what you want, loosen that rein, let them have their head back. Let them have that slack in that rein. Then start walking. Cue your horse to walk, whether you lean forward in your hips or you give them a very, very subtle squeeze with your legs. As soon as they start going, turning them in circles. in whichever direction your rein is on. If it's on the left-hand side, slide your left hand down, pick up the slack on that rein, shorten it just a bit, very gently. Your horse should be turning left. As soon as they do, loosen that rein again. Let that slack out. Your right hand is just there to hold on to the end of that rein. This is using one rein. You should have your hands in a collective 10-inch box. We don't want our hands going towards our hips. If we do, we're too loud. We have loud hands. We're moving too much. We're throwing our balance off. This is making the horse uncomfortable. We're being loud with our hands. We want soft horses. We have to be soft. Loud hands make loud horses. Good saying that you hear a lot in the horse world, that if you're fighting your horse, you have a bit or no bit and your hands are going everywhere, you're teaching your horse to ignore your hand signals, to ignore the pressure on the reins, to ignore the pressure in your saddle. You're talking so much that you're nagging them, they learn to ignore you. So when you give them a cue, make sure it is just a cue. They understand how to do it, and then let it go. Try this for a little while. See if you can get your horse to stop. By getting them to stop, you take that rein, you shorten it just a bit, leaning it against their neck, and pull it back towards your body. Not high up on your body, but just more towards your belly button. The horse should stop. You may need to lean back just a pinch. When you do this, and by doing this, your horse should stop, and you loosen that rein again. If they move forward, go ahead and stop them again. Loosen that rein again. Same if a dog is taking off on you on a walk and you're trying to teach them loose leash. Now, once you learn to do it on the left hand, switch your rein over and do it on the right hand. When you get your lead on the other side, try working again from the right side, sliding your hand down, taking that slack away until your horse turns their head or flexes, and loosen that lead away. Try again on the right side. Move your hand down, take up that slack with that rein. As soon as they either flex or turn in the direction you want, loosen that lead right away. Give them their head. They learn by the timing of release. If you hold your rein there, you're just going to stand in a circle. Your horse will try flexing. They say, "This is not the right answer. I'm confused. Let me try something else." We don't want to confuse our animals, so make sure that you know what you want before you ask your horse for it. If you don't know what you want, the horse certainly doesn't. Do this back and forth until you feel confident enough to go riding outside of the pen. This is a great way to stop your horse. If they take off on you, they get spooked, they run off on you, you learn how to do a one rein stop. When the horse is running, you don't grab onto the horn, you don't go into fetal position, don't panic, don't pull back on the rein. When you pull back on the rein, you go into your fight or flight instinct. We go into fetal position, we pull back on both reins, and the horse learns to brace it, and they don't stop. By teaching your horse to go into a one rein stop, you slide down, you take that head away, you take that slack away from that rein, the horse turns their head, you go into circles until the horse stops. The horse is going to stop running because they're only going to go in circles. And as soon as they stop, you let go of that rein. The horse learns, well, running only got me in circles, so maybe I can calm down. Then you can take that time to help your horse overcome whatever it was that spooked them. Over time, you can have your one collective rein, or your typical 2 reins on your horse, but you're only going to be riding with one. You slide your hand down, the right side or the left side. Even though you have 2 reins, you'll be riding with one rein, always making sure to keep it as loose as you possibly can. Now, the training and the riding are only part of owning a horse. Training and riding are only part of owning a horse, and perhaps the most fun part to a lot of people. But don't forget about the most important things that come with owning any animal, which is adequate housing and a species-appropriate diet. If you're not sure what the best environment is for keeping a horse, try to think about what is natural to them. Horses need plenty of grass to graze on, room to play and run and stretch those back muscles out, plenty of clean water to drink, and soak their hooves in when it's hot. And since they're awake the majority of the day, they need an environment to keep them busy and herd members to keep them feeling safe and mentally stimulated. What this would look like is a horse with some friends to keep them company. This could be other horses, sheep, cattle, chickens, goats, or even pigs. Basically, any other herd animal will do, just so long as they're not the only one in the pasture. They need lots of healthy grass to graze on during their 20 hours of wake, and clean water daily. Horses can use up to 12 gallons of saliva a day just while eating and digesting their food, so they need to replenish that to stay hydrated. And consider having a salt block and mineral block available to them, making sure they're cool and clean, and not left out in the sun to get boiling hot or disgusting and dirty. These help the horse to keep up with their electrolytes and other minerals. What a horse doesn't need is to be locked up in a small dark stall or a dirty paddock that hasn't been cleaned and mucked in days, with algae-ridden water that's thick with sludge, and they only see human contact when it's time to toss the horse a flake of hay twice a day, or until the weekend comes around, and the human decides to tack up their horse and practice for an upcoming sport event. Then they put their horse up, sore, tired, and sweaty, and promise they'll come back the next weekend, and the cycle continues. This may sound exaggerated, but it's a very common theme among many barns, both private and public. None of this is natural to a horse, especially when they start to develop stall vices. These are behaviors where the horse will pace in their stall, they will start wood chewing, they chew on the wood, they will start wind sucking, they will start cribbing, they will put their mouth over a piece of wood or a metal bar and they open their mouth and they suck in a bit of air. Horses cannot take air in through their throat. They can only exhale air out. Through their nostrils, they can take air in and out. But when they force a gulp of air down their throat, this gives them a bit of an endorphin rush, and it's really all just about a horse that is very bored and they're just coming up with anything to keep their mind from going crazy. People will also say that they like to keep their horse in a stall alone because they become herd sour or barn sour, which is just another nonsense term meaning that the horse is a herd animal. They enjoy being around other herd animals. They feel comfort in that. They don't like to be alone. They find safety at the barn and with their herd members. So if people try to walk their animal away from the barn, the horse doesn't want to go, or the horse will, fight to go back to the barn. It's very natural. You can teach your horse to not do this, but labeling them things such as being herd sour or barn sour or buddy sour is just a way for the human to make excuses for themselves, really. It's just a way for the human to make excuses for what they don't know. And regardless of how nice the stalls are or how tidy the staff keeps the barn, and they make sure to brush the horses every day, there's a saying out in the horse world that fancy barns and expensive hay isn't love to a horse. It's not good for horses to eat just twice a day. They should be grazing through the whole day. Even if it takes them an hour to finish their food, usually horses that are fed twice a day, someone throws a solid flake in there with them. A flake of hay, it's just a square, about 2x2 square foot of hay, maybe a little bit bigger than that. The horse bites it and eats it very quickly because they're hungry all day long. They're waiting for that food. They're starving. They take in big chunks. They swallow big chunks. That leads to colic, which is a blockage in the intestines. A lot of horses can develop this. It's very easy to avoid if you break up your hay. It takes more time, but again, it benefits the horse. Horses need to be grazing all day, and they need to keep up with the water and their salt and their electrolytes and minerals, and not just eat the same moldy, disgusting hay that's been thrown in their paddock. Or if it's thrown in their paddock and they only get fed once or twice, that's even though they've peed and soiled all over their stall and sometimes in the hay or next to the hay, they have no other option but to eat that hay because they're hungry. And they don't have, they have another 18 hours before they're fed again. Eating twice a day for horses that are grazing animals, even rabbits, guinea pigs, it's just not good. They should always have that availability to have food. So that's another reason I don't like stalling horses or locking them up and just feeding them twice a day. They should be grazing. With a horse that grazes, you can still give them hay as a little bit of extra supplementation. You can tell when a horse is eating enough when they leave bits of that hay behind. If they eat it all, especially in the winter months if they're outside 24/7 and it gets a little cold, you give them an extra bit of food to help them grow their fur out properly. They'll keep more fat on them. They will stay healthier. They will, if they're full enough, then they'll leave some stems of that hay, left over. They're not going to eat every little bit of it. But if they're hungry, even though they're grazing, especially in the winter when the grass is gone, they might eat a little bit of extra food. It might help to keep their immune system up. Who knows? Just like with humans and anything else, moderation is key, and it's always good to have a little bit of options in your diet. I'm sure the horse would at least appreciate having been given the option between their food other than just the one choice they have. Now, while keeping your horses in pasture, it's equally important to understand the dangers that can occur while your horse is out there, including if you let them out with a herd during the day, but then you stall them again at night and you let them out again in the day. They're constantly going to be fighting over the herd hierarchy. Remember the higher horse, lower horse. If you take them in at night, they lose their status in the herd, versus if they're there 24/7. So if you have two horses constantly fighting, chances are it would be better if you left them out 24/7. They can figure it out, they can get it over with in a couple of days, and they understand very simply who's higher or who's lower. They may have a few bites on them, they may have a few hoof marks from some kicks, maybe a couple scratches, but then that's just life of being a horse. Now, when you let the horse out, it's always important to take off the halters. Do not leave halters on horses when they're out in pasture. Many people do this because they can't catch the horse again. It's just like a dog who has a harness on all the time or even a collar on all the time. It's easy to catch the horse with the halter on. The horse knows that you can grab him. It's still very dangerous. Many horses get their face caught on stuff. They choke themselves. They panic. They get hooves in there, especially baby horses, little foals and fillies. Little foals will get they're playing and they get the hooves caught in there and they just cause so much damage. So please don't leave halters on horses when they're not being supervised in pasture. They get thrown into the face and just lots of other issues that can happen. If a horse can get in trouble and hurt themselves, they will. That's just the way horses are. They're very curious creatures and they can easily get themselves in trouble. Now, with that comes pasture design. Make sure that when you have a fence and you let your horse out, look for choke points and corners. And these are important when working with herd animals, or really any animal, is because say you have a horse in a corner and there's a higher horse that moves into that corner. If the lower horse can't get out because they're trapped, then they're going to get in trouble. You can have a fight break out. They can get more injured because they're in that corner. Unless you take that corner away and make sure you have kind of rounded ends to your fence, or if you have a shaded area that you want your horses to have shade, say it's a big room, and you only have one way in and one way out, that's a really bad design, because if a lower horse is in the shaded area, a higher horse comes in, higher horse pins ears and tells the lower horse to move, blocking that entrance. Lower horse can't get out because higher horse is there. And they don't understand that they're blocking the way. They don't understand why the horse isn't leaving. They don't care. Higher horse is just saying, hey, I told you to move. You're not listening. You're not yielding. Let me put more pressure on you. Lower horse is trying, but they can't. So if you build any area for your horses to come in, make sure they have multiple areas in and out. Same with dogs, same with predators and prey animals alike. You want multiple areas to come in and multiple areas to come out. At least one to come in, one to come out. So when you're building a design, either your own pasture or you're at a barn and you see a design for a shelter, make sure that think like a horse. Make sure there's no corners to get trapped in. Make sure that there's multiple ways in and out. Make sure there's enough shade for everybody. And same with when you have an entrance to the pasture. Don't put your entrance by a corner, because again, you have it's a draw. When you have an entrance, you have shade, you have water, you have a feeding area. These are all draws. Draws are something that is going to attract multiple animals. Same with predators, same with dogs. So if you have your entranceway in a corner, that's a bad place for the entranceway. A lot of horses will be drawn there. There's a corner there. There's a lot of fights that can break out, a lot of trouble that can happen. So it's easier to actually have your entrance gate away from a corner in the middle of the fence where there's wide opening on either side so nobody can get trapped. If you have a water bucket, make sure it's not out in the sun by itself where it's going to get super hot and covered in algae, and algae is going to grow in there and it's going to get disgusting. Change your water daily, or at least every other day. Check it often. Don't have it by an entranceway, because then it's just going to add a little bit more of a draw and you're going to have some trouble and there's going to be mud there. Maybe have it a little bit away from the entranceway. Don't have it in a corner. If it's going to be in a shady area, make sure that there's room that everybody can get in and get some water, or multiple horses can come in and get water and not get trapped. There's just a lot of things to think about when dealing with horses and hierarchy and draws and all that. If you are feeding horses that are out in pasture, you're making some piles of hay for them that are all broken up and they can eat them. Don't just have one pile of hay for multiple horses. So if you have 4 horses, maybe you should put 5 piles of hay. This is a good way to allow, if one horse is going to get pushed off, he can go to the other hay, and so on and so forth. So you want more piles than there are number of animals, just so that way, when one gets pushed off, they can still go to another pile. Just be aware what you're teaching these animals and what they're teaching you. Quick little note about back to grain. Grain is usually used as a treat. Some rolled oats, maybe a little bit of cracked corn, maybe a little bit of rice bran, some sweet feed. Those are treats. Most of the time people will feed buckets and buckets of grain, and it's just full of a lot of sugar, and horses really don't need a whole lot of grain. They enjoy it, of course, but just like predators don't need grain in their diet, horses don't need a whole lot in theirs either. It's really a treat. Too much grain, too much sugar, it's not good for the system. Good roughage hay and good grass are a good proper diet for a horse, and you can give them a little grain, a handful or so, maybe a cup or so, or 2 cups, divided by a couple of horses is fine. But lots of people will overdo it on the grain and overdo it on the supplementation and give these supplements every single day, and supplements are meant to be supplemented, maybe a couple times a week, maybe every now and then, keep the immune system up. Horses can be very, very delicate when changing diet, so if you change it all the time, you can cause them to colic, or if you never change it, you can cause them to colic. So there's no absolute in life. If you hear someone ever saying always do this or never do this, then question that. because for me, there's no absolutes in life. Everything depends. Every context of every situation really depends. So that was today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. I know there was a long little tangent there, just going over a whole bunch of different topics in the horsey world, basically just going over the basics. This doesn't even scratch the surface, but hopefully, give you guys a little bit better of an understanding of at least looking at things from the horse's point of view, looking into more horsemanship than just sportsmanship, I guess. Horsemanship, think like a horse. Don't think like a human or a predator. Don't be selfish. Don't do it because it's easier or because it's quicker or because you're lazy. If you take the time it takes less time, and the animal doesn't end up paying for it. So I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, stay positive.